Okay, so that's me. I actually didn't put together any slides because I was incredibly lazy. And so we're just doing this on the web. So my name's Dylan. Hello. I write over at closingtags.com. I think a lot of you were here in January when I gave a talk about rewriting that in Svelte and Svelte Kit. It's kind of my thing lately. I kind of do a lot of stuff with Svelte and Svelte Kit. In fact, I went on so far as to write a whole book about Svelte Kit. So, if you've got Svelte or Svelte Kit questions, let me know. Okay, so what else do we have here? So today, I wanted to talk about the thing that my computer science professors told me not to do in any of my code, and that is like creating global variables that you can access throughout your entire application. In Svelte, these are called stores. And with the release of Svelte 5, a lot of those things that were previously handled by stores, you don't need to use the stores anymore. I swear I remember reading a whole thing about Rich Harris saying, yeah, we're going to deprecate stores, but that's not the case. Stores are going to stay around. They'll still be usable within Svelte. However, you don't need them for all of the things that you maybe used to need them for. And I can kind of explain what I mean here. So stores are an object that implement the store contract. The store contract is very particular in that you need a subscribe method that also returns an unsubscribe callback function. And after that, your store can have anything else on it. So you can have, but you have to have that subscribe and that unsubscribe method. And so you can read more on the Svelte documentation about what stores are, and there's all sorts of great things. But stores are really cool when it comes to syncing data to your backend. You do have to be careful about going to a backend. But if you're saving things in local storage or IndexedDB, super awesome. And I'm really pro that. So I'm going to show you a couple code examples, and we're going to keep this pretty short. I didn't even put these in slides because we wanted to keep it so short. But this is the Svelte playground, and it's basically like a REPL for Svelte stuff. You can't do Svelte Kit things, you can't do your backend stuff, but you can do, play with all the new Svelte features and play with runes and everything. So that's the big thing with Svelte 5, right, is runes. They've changed how reactivity works in Svelte, and so all of the things that we used to do in Svelte 4, you don't do those in Svelte 5 anymore because a few things have broken. So in this example, what I have here is very simple counter, right? We have a number, and we have plus and minus buttons. Is this visible? Can everybody see this okay? All right. So I click the plus button, number go up. I click the minus button, number go down, right? This is great. We have this little text box. You can see that changes as well, right? The cool thing about this is that I'm not actually passing this data, how do I say it? There's no prop being passed between these components. This is all using just a store. And of course, this is a very simple and contrived example, but it's just an example for demonstration purposes. The cool thing that I'll go into how the stores are used, and then I'm gonna show you the actual store itself, and we'll talk about that code. And then I'm gonna show you how to do the exact same thing, but without stores, because we don't need stores anymore. And then we'll go into how all of that works. So, anybody in here not familiar with Svelte? Do I need to do a quick crash course? Great, everybody has seen all of my talks. We're good. Okay, so we're going to import this count store from the store.js file. We're also importing display and input. These two are just Svelte components. From that, we've got a div. We've got some styles down here at the bottom. I'm going to come back to this await, this count init, because that's a thing that we'll get into with the store. But you can see that I'm just doing the display here and the input, and that these are separate Svelte components. You can see here the store count minus. This is all of the code that I need to go in and adjust the value of that store, which is then reactive across all of the components that it's been included in. So I just do, on click, call this anonymous function, count minus. And stores are really cool because they have this $, the store name, and then you have the data that is in the store. If you try to console log or see whatever data is within that store without the $, you're going to get an object with a bunch of different methods on it, and it's going to have all sorts of crazy things going on. But if you do the $, you are just getting the data. And so that is one of the cool things about stores. But we don't need them anymore, right? right? Like, so how are we going to do the rest of this? So you can see the minus minus, you can see the plus plus. We can go into this text box here, and we can change this. We can set it to whatever we want. So how does that work? I'm going to show you the display, right? Super simple. I'm just doing the $ count, right? And that is just whatever value we have in the Svelte store. The input.svelte is a little more interesting in that we had to do some clever things here. This bind value is a two-way binding. That means whatever value we put into this input is going to update the store value. And it's super clean, it's super simple, and you can go ahead and manipulate this. So if I were to go change this here, you can see, that it changes the value up above. And those are separate components, and I'm not passing props or anything between them. Like Svelte just knows how to do that. So now let's get into the store and how that works here. So the store, the big thing with the store is that I've pulled in the writable store. There's different types of stores that Svelte has. We've got writable, we've got readable, and we've got derived. Readable, of course, you can't write to. You can't set it. There is no set method to update that value. Writable is, of course, one that you can change throughout the entire application. And then derived is one that is comprised of the values of different stores, if that makes sense. So if I've got a search box and I want to update the search results, my search results can be a derived store based on whatever query I've put into my search box. Okay. So this method, createCounter, is just returning an object here, and I'm spreading the writable store onto that. Here, though, I can overwrite any of those methods, and so I can make the set method whatever I want. And so I can increment it by 10 instead of, or 11, I guess. If I click plus here, I've overridden the default set method, and now it goes up by 11 every time I click that. Right? This is, you obviously don't need to do this if you've just got a simple writable store, but it's great if you are doing things like with your data storage. If you're doing stuff in local storage, you can then intercept that value as it's being set and then update it in your local storage, in your IndexedDB or whatever. This init method is, of course, one that I've added, and I just wanted to put that one on there to demonstrate that you can do it with, I have a lot of code that is doing this with IndexedDB. And IndexedDB, I have to do a lot of asynchronous stuff, and my stores are connected directly into IndexedDB. So I update my stores on the front end, and then I've got a method on the back end, the set method or whatever I'm using to override that is then automatically writing that into the database. So every keystroke, everything will be automatically updated right there. Okay, and so obviously you can see this is a fake delay, a fake async that I've got here. So any questions on stores so far? No, great, cool. Moving on. How do you do this without stores now? Now let's see it in runes. Okay, so remember the big thing here is importing the writable and then using that here to create this store object, which we're then overwriting. To do this with runes and without stores, the big thing with runes is that you can use them anywhere in your Svelte application as long as you have a .svelte file. And so you can create .svelte.js or .svelte.ts, and that is valid. You can use stores all throughout that. You can create .svelte.test.js, and you can start using runes within your tests now, which is really handy. So here we have the same exact application, except it's done with runes. And so I don't have to do that import of the writable store. Instead, I'm creating this data variable, and then I'm giving it the state rune. There's a few different runes within the new Svelte 5. We've got state, we've got derived, there's props, and then there's a few other ones. I don't need to go into all of those. Effectively, though, state is the one that creates a reactive variable. That is how you're going to have your variable that's going to be changing that you want to then automatically reflect in your user interface. And here, all I have to do is just return a simple object. That object is going to have whatever methods on it I need it to have. So if I want to have an update method, if I want to have a delete method, if I want to have, again, an initialize, so I can pull in that data from IndexedDB, dump it right into my data variable, and then run my awaits that I showed you before. The key here is having a get and set methods. The get one is literally just returning whatever data has. Whatever data we dumped into that data variable is just returned from this method. And so here, this code could be cleaned up a little bit, but for demonstration purposes, it's pretty simple. The set is then just taking our new value and writing it over data. And because this is reactive, anytime I change this, we're going to see it. The same way that stores work, but now I'm not using the Svelte store anymore. I am instead using stores.svelte.js, the count that we pulled in that uses runes. So it's just an object that is wrapped around a rune. So again, you can see the count init, and that is initializing. I wanted to do a whole fetch API type thing, but you can see that it's initializing with a random number. So if I change anything here, the REPL is then going to go and recalculate and give me a new random number. And so that is like the initialization happening again here. So how do we then use this like we did in previous examples with the stores? Well, the first thing, are getting and setting stuff. Keeping this as simple as we can. On click of the minus is just going to do the count.set method. But I'm also going to pass in whatever the current value is, -1. And so count.get is getting our current value. Same with the plus, right? It's just the same thing, but the other direction. The display obviously hasn't changed much. I mean, instead of $count, I just do count.get, which is a little more verbose, but I think it's a little more clear as to what's actually happening there. The input one is the one that we've noticed the biggest change on. With Svelte 5.9, bindings are now allowed on 2 functions. So you can pass a get method and a set method. And so we can now bind without doing the $count. And obviously that's not going to work with this object because $count isn't valid for what we have here. So instead we pass it the get and the set methods. So this first binding, or this first function that is being passed to the bind is just the count.get, get the value. And then whenever we update this value, it will know to run the count.set with whatever value I've set in there. So you can see that reflected in this other component, the display component, right up here. And again, none of this data is being passed between these components like you'd have to pass props. So that's kind of the biggest thing. Testing, again, with these is also super simple because if you're using the test, which comes prepackaged with Svelte and SvelteKit, you can just do v.mock and then give it your stores.svelte.js and then say for count, return this data, right? Like on the count.get, I just want you to give me this data, and that's your test data, right? And that I think is pretty much all I had. So, any questions? Svelte stores, runes. Okay, cool. That's what I got.